Motherfucker. I make this noise to smash you.
Alright, we got a question from Marko Apokalypse. And the question is, how has my work changed or advanced since I started? So I don't want to get into too much of a history of my band, my solo endeavor, but I will get into a little bit about how things have gone over the years and how they've kind of evolved and changed, and you know, some of the gear that I was using and such like that. So in the beginning I was using well, first of all, when I was 15 I got a drum set from my parents. 14 or 15, somewhere in there. I got a drum set from my parents. I was keen on playing drums, and they got me a drum set for my birthday, and eventually lessons as well. And then somewhere later on in the years, when I was a teenager, I ended up buying myself a guitar, a starter guitar. I still have it actually. It's still a piece of shit, but I still use it for some of my guitars. And it's one of those like no-name brand kind of guitars, like it really is a piece of shit. Eventually got access via a step-parent at the time to their 386 computer. It was a really old computer. It was way back in 96 or 97, something like that. And I had acquired some software. We'd started a band with a bunch of friends, and they gave me a piece of freeware software called Impulse Tracker. Impulse Tracker, some of you might know, is a DOS-based tracker program. It's kind of like a sequencer, but you can load in your own samples and stuff, and they have some very basic effects and stuff in there, like really basic, and they have some internal sounds, but once again, it's very basic. And at the time I had just gotten a job, and I didn't have a lot of gear when I started, other than the drums and the guitar. When I started using this 386 computer and Impulse Tracker, there was no speakers other than the internal speaker on the computer. So I was basically writing music with that internal speaker, and that's kind of how I started writing and stuff. And then eventually, when I could afford it, I eventually bought a sound card for that computer and got some speakers. And then eventually at some point I recorded my first song for that band back then. We didn't really go anywhere or really play any live shows or anything like that, but that's another story for another time. But I didn't have a mic at the time, so I needed a way to get the vocals into the computer. So basically what I did was I took an old pair of headphones that used to be my dad's, and I was like, what if I just plug this into the audio in on the line in on or the mic in on the sound card, and sing into it. So I did that, and it fucking worked, and I sampled my vocals, and then what I did was I chopped the sample. I think I was using Sound Recorder or something like that, like very basic sound recorder, just getting little clips and then cutting those clips up and then sequencing them into Impulse Tracker so I could have vocals in my songs. And eventually a friend lent me their Tascam Porta Studio 414 or whatever the fuck it was, and I eventually dubbed that down to tape, and then that was kind of my first song. Then I eventually got a mic for myself, a Samson Q mic, very basic, definitely affordable. At the time I think I paid maybe $100 for it. And then eventually I got an amp so I could play my guitar. And a friend of mine at the time, they had a bass guitar, and sometimes I'd use their bass amp to plug my mic into, and then of course my band and stuff would rehearse or just kind of jam, and you know, I'd sing through that bass amp and play guitars on the other amp. And then eventually I traded that amp because I wanted to record stuff, and I traded that amp for a new Tascam Porta Studio 414, and then I moved to a new city after that, like pretty fucking quickly after that. I dissolved that band because there was nothing going on there, and started to record my first album. I was using Impulse Tracker, of course, but this computer, I think it was a 486 or it was a Pentium. I'm not entirely sure. I can't quite remember. I remember playing games on it, so it could process like graphics and stuff fairly well, but I'm pretty sure it was actually a Pentium, but it was like Pentium 1 or something like that. Very, very basic. I was living with my parents at the time, and they were lending me their computer so I could write music, and I wrote my first album with that. And then what I did was I dubbed down, I took the audio from the computer, plugged it into the Tascam, recorded everything onto tape on Tascam. Then I had a friend, neighbor friend, who lived next door, who he played guitar, and I got him to play some guitars on the album, and then I did vocals. And then what I did was I took the Tascam to another friend's place, and then dubbed that to regular speed cassettes, because the Tascam speed is different. It's not the same speed as a regular cassette, so you couldn't actually just like pop the cassette into a regular stereo and play and it'd be fine. You actually had to dub them down to that regular speed. That took quite a bit of work just to get like 13 or 14 tapes. It was a lot of work, and because you're sitting there and you're pressing play on the Tascam, and then you're hitting record on the stereo, and you're going through every single song and dubbing them that way. And I think it took like 8 hours or something like that. I think it was 8 or something like that to dub down all the tapes to regular speed cassette. And then of course I made up artwork for it, and then put that together, and then shrunk the artwork down, because the actual size of the artwork is like that big or whatever. And then what I did, I figured out what you could do is you could shrink down, if I created the artwork 50% larger than what it's supposed to be. At the time, the way color photocopiers worked is that you could actually just reduce the size by 50%, and then it would actually kind of line up with the tape cassette booklets and stuff. So that's kind of how I did the artwork and stuff. Then eventually I moved overseas and took all those tapes with me, and that was my first ever solo release as my project Twitch, and took all those tapes overseas for 4.5 months. I gave a bunch of them away, and once again, I don't want to get too much into Twitch's history. I'm just trying to go over, the work and how it's changed and how it's advanced and stuff like that. And then came back here after I was in London, England for 4.5 months. And at first I wasn't really writing anything, and then I wasn't doing very well mentally, and then I just realized like I needed a shift. Long story short, I got into a bit of trouble, and it actually helped me, because basically it was a positive shift. Like my first album as Twitch was basically there was some positive stuff on there, and I kind of had a direction, but then there was also a lot of negative stuff on there too, and then I had this mental shift after I'd gotten into trouble, and I got help, and it was kind of like this going from negative to positive shift, and in that process I wrote a new album. And then that was a little bit different as far as technical, the way I did it. I was using a 486 this time, so it was basically a downgrade, and wrote everything in Impulse Tracker once again, and then I dubbed that down to the Tascam. Oh wait. Part of the process was with the 486, and then eventually, somewhere in the middle of that process, I had gotten a computer as a gift from my parents, and it was a custom computer that a family member built, my dad actually, and then what I did was I dubbed everything down into the Tascam. I got all the audio into the Tascam, and then what I did, took the Tascam, and after everything was recorded onto it, and then plugged it back into the audio card on the computer, and then resampled everything, and then took those songs that have been resampled and threw them onto CD, because I wanted to go more CDRs, so I wanted to go and do CDRs, and of course I made all the artwork for that as well. I did that digitally. Partially digital. I had a scanner, and I scanned another thing that I had painted and used that as the cover, and then I used something like Photoshop or something like that to build the actual artwork and or the rest of the artwork. And then eventually I came across a new piece of software. That was my second album, then which is called We Are Here to Dance. Oops. And then eventually I came across another piece of software called Just Go La Buzz Tracker, and I was like, hey, this is cool. It's a Windows-based tracker program, kind of like Impulse Tracker, but actually Windows-based rather than DOS-based. And it had all these built-in synths and stuff, and you could download all these like different like effects and synths and stuff like that. And like I said, it was a tracker program, and I started writing the next album, which was called TCP/IP, and that album I started with Impulse Tracker, and then I eventually migrated to Just Go La Buzz Tracker, and wrote the rest of the album using that. Originally I was going for an industrial metal hip hop sound, and TCP/IP, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. I was like, yeah, I want to go more pop and all this stuff, and more EBM type stuff, kind of in the vein of like V&V Nation or a Summer's 23 or something like that. So I started writing in that fashion, and of course I released it like that. But of course that learning, that was a mistake. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I recorded the rest of that album, and then I had gotten my hands on an old version of Cakewalk. I think it was like Cakewalk 9 or something like that. And basically what I did was I did everything in just I did what I could with Impulse Tracker for the first like 5 or 6 songs on the album, and then everything else on the album was with Just Go La Buzz Tracker. Of course, I think if I remember correctly, I resampled everything from the doing it the old way with the Impulse Tracker, and dubbing that down into tape, and then putting it back into the computer with the vocals and all that kind of stuff, and recorded from the tape. And then I used those on the album, and then with Just Go La Buzz Tracker, I had written all the basic sequences and stuff like that, and then I like I said, I somehow managed to get access to Cakewalk 9 or something like that, just an old version of Cakewalk. I didn't know how to use it. I was just like, I'm gonna try doing vocals with this. So basically I imported all the wave files from Just Go La Buzz Tracker, the stereo wave files. I dropped that into the Cakewalk, and then basically I would just like hit record on Cakewalk and do my vocals that way. And I plugged, if I remember correctly, I plugged my mic into the audio in on the sound card. That's how I got my vocals in there. And then did that, and then yeah, that is what I did. I had a special little converter for it and stuff like that, and did that, and then of course I had all the WAV files, and then I put that on CD. And that album was a 2-disc CD. There was, I think, 6 songs on the first CD, and then like 14 or 15 on the next one on the 2-disc thing. And then in 2004, I did my very first live performance. I didn't have any synthesizers or anything like that. I basically had a friend that drove me to the venue, and I brought my entire fucking PC with me, the desktop PC, and plugged the audio out, or line out, or whatever, speaker out from the PC into their front of house system, and that's how the performance went. I had a mic and sang, and that was basically the performance, and that's how that very first show rolled out. I think I played for about 45 minutes, and 40 or 45 minutes, and I opened for a band called Voice Industry, which we had the pleasure of playing with many years later. Yeah, that was kind of the first live show. And then after that, I didn't do a live show for quite some time after that, but I was highly inspired to do my next album. It was called Welcome, and Welcome I wrote in the same fashion, using just Gola Buzz Tracker, same process. I think the guitars, I sampled the guitars. I had a little effects processor from years ago. I had forgotten to mention that, but I had gotten an effects Zoom 505 or something like that, guitar effects processor, and I had actually gotten that in the early years when I was still living in Saskatoon with my other band. But yeah, I used that Zoom pedal, and I plugged the audio out from that into the computer, and then sampled my guitars, and then threw the guitars into the songs, and that's kind of how it rolled out. And then yeah, I'd basically stopped using the Tascam. The only thing I used it for really was a mixer between my vocals or my guitar and the sound card on the computer, so I could kind of mess with the levels a little bit. Same process, you know, everything gets turned into using just Gola Buzz Tracker and Cakewalk 9th edition or something like that, and then taking those WAV files taking the WAV files and then turning them into MP3s and then throwing them on CD. And I designed my own cover artwork for that and printed them out and cut them and stuff, and made CDRs, and then it wasn't until a few years later that I really kicked into doing live performances, due to several reasons, because I was always looking for a guitarist or a drummer or someone to play with, and I could never really get people on board with that. So eventually I was like, well, I gotta do something here. So eventually I kicked into live performances. I did find a drummer, and we did have a guitarist for a while, but he ended up moving away, so he didn't end up playing with us live. But I did have a drummer. We played a couple of times as a live unit with just us two. And at the time, I had acquired a laptop, a used laptop, which was given to me, and I had Cakewalk sonar on that laptop. I also at the time acquired an audio MIDI interface, the Motu Ultralight MK3. I still have it. I still use it for my live performances. And this was like back in like 2012. So like, yeah. So I've had it. It's 2022 now. So I've had it for 10 years. So solid unit. I would highly recommend anything Motu puts out. They're solid, durable, nice and chunky. So if they're durable and stuff, and they work really well, and I've rarely had issues with them. So, and I also acquired my very first real synth purchase. I had a DX100 from years back, but I never really used it for anything. Purchased the Yamaha EX7 synthesizer. It's kind of like a synth workstation. It's got several different forms of synthesis. It can sample, it has a sequencer, it has an arpeggiator, it has a pattern sequencer, all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of the big thing for me. I wanted that synth. That synth is literally my baby. I haven't really purchased any other synthesizers since then. When it comes to gear and stuff, I'm very minimal. I don't have gear acquisition syndrome or gas or whatever the fuck you want to call it. There is some other stuff I have purchased. I did get some aftermarket upgrades for it, just to upgrade it so I can use it in its fullest form and fashion. Sonar eventually started to crap out, like I couldn't get more than 4 tracks into it for some reason, so I was like, I need to do something for live shows, and I can't use Sonar anymore. So I went and purchased a non-commercial license for Reaper, and I used that for many years, and it wasn't until this last year that I stopped using it, and I'm using something else. But I acquired FL Studio 9, Producer Edition, and I've been using that since then. So from 2012, 2013, I basically have been using it since then. Ever since I first got it, I basically, once I got it, I was originally writing my next album called Ant in Sonar, but I didn't like the workflow and I couldn't really understand it, so I ended up getting FL Studio 9, and then that's how I've been working since. Like that's what I've been using, and every album after that, after Ant, is done with FL Studio 9. If you're curious about my music, you can find it at twitch-official.bandcamp.com. So if you want to check that out, or even support us or whatever, go to the Bandcamp and you can check out and hear the evolution of the music. And basically, since the second album, the first self-titled was kind of like, I haven't really found my direction. Like there was a little bit of a direction, but not quite. And then it was the album after that I kind of had that positive shift. And then ever since then, it's been mostly positive stuff. And then Ant was kind of more focused on mentality of military, that kind of thing. And just because I felt I needed to explore that, and continue to do live shows until fucking, like, we literally have another live show tomorrow. I guess it's tomorrow. I eventually switched from Cocos Reaper to Ableton Live Lite because I was having issues with Cocos Reaper, and that switchover was just in the last like year and a half, and it was kind of a bit of a downgrade because I have a limitation as far as how many tracks I can actually utilize in Ableton Live Lite 11, but I will eventually upgrade it at a certain point, just not right now. But you kind of work with what you have, and you find a way to do things. If it's what you want to do, you'll find a way of making it work, and that's kind of what my philosophy has been during this my entire history of, you know, doing music is, you know, kind of finding ways of making it work because I want to do it. And, you know, some people think, oh, I can't do this until I have this piece of gear, and it's like, actually, I don't want to get into a rant here, but, you know, I started with you know, a fucking 386 and the internal speaker on a fucking computer. So don't tell me that you need a certain piece of gear in order to. Granted, you probably need a computer, but there's ways of going about and doing that. And there might even your library might actually. Yeah, I don't want to get into rant, but yes, your library might actually have some kind of access to recording software that you can book time in to record stuff. I think our library here actually has that. I know they have a video editing suite and all that kind of stuff. So you might want to check out your library if you're looking to get started in music, because that might be an option. Our library here also rents instruments and stuff like that. So libraries are very, very useful, helpful, not only for knowledge, but also for other things too. So once again, maybe you want to check out your library to get started. Anyway, been playing live shows. The live show rig has changed a little bit. In the last couple of years, I really pared down on my gear. Like, I'm not taking my main synthesizer, the Yamaha EX7, out to shows anymore because of all these aftermarket upgrades I got. Don't want to be moving it around and fucking with that stuff. But I pared it down to I eventually purchased a new laptop. I got a MIDI controller because I wanted something to play with while I'm playing live. I just don't want to do karaoke. And so the MIDI controller's an M Audio Oxygen 25 MK4, and I still use my Motu Audio MIDI interface, the MK3 Ultralight Hybrid, and that's for running the sound on the computer with Ableton and getting the sound to the front of the house. I also obviously record with that as well. Somewhere in there I got studio monitors. It was probably around the time when I acquired FL Studio 9, because that's during that period when we started to first kick into like doing more and more live shows. There was a bunch of gear that I bought at kind of at the same time, almost like kind of within a few months within each other. I had gotten the audio MIDI interface, I had gotten the monitors, the studio monitors, the M Audio BX5As. Eventually, I also got myself a vocal effects processor for the live show, something very basic, a TC Helicon Perform V. Just a little unit so I have something to play with and something to change my voice and affect the voice while I'm performing live. I eventually got an Alesis Sample Pad 4. I originally got it because we currently don't have a drummer, and I was thinking, well, maybe I can teach someone to play along, and, you know, and then they'll have that little unit to play with, and that's just the way it is. Or, you know, maybe somebody who can actually play comes along, and, you know, we have a minimal setup, really quick and easy to set up and tear down, and, you know, having the sample pad for it's like literally that big. I'm actually using it for because it's right now it's myself and a guitarist who's just doing live guitars. He doesn't do any recording with Twitch, but he's a live guitarist, and I perform on the sample pad as well during those live performances. I mean, why not? If I have it, might as well. And once again, everything is really compact, really like really easy to stuff into a bag and just like a backpack, a larger backpack, but you know, just something that you can throw on your back and go to play live shows and stuff like that. I also have a keyboard stand that I use as well. That's probably the biggest thing that is of any kind of concern as far as like traveling goes. And actually, the last show that we did in Edmonton here, I live in Calgary. Edmonton is like 3 hours north of Calgary, and the last show I did there back in February, I basically packed all my gear into a bag. I didn't even bother taking the keyboard stand because I just didn't want to have to deal with it, and I think it might have been an extra cost on I took the bus. I took a bus to Edmonton, and I just didn't want to throw the stand under and have it bounce around and stuff. I just didn't want to have to deal with it, and actually musician friends out in Edmonton let me use their stand for that Edmonton show. But yeah, that's kind of what the kit is now. Like that's kind of how my gear and my recording process has evolved. I'm not using tracker programs anymore. I do all my writing in FL Studio 9, and I really like FL Studio 9 because I like FL Studio in general because it's really easy to just, get your shit into it, and even in the playlist, I think it's the playlist view. It's like painting. It's like painting fucking your sequences and your fucking, if you want to take a section of like audio that you've recorded and repeated over a period of time, you can do that, and it's really easy to just paint it into the playlist and stuff. So I really like using FL Studio 9. It's very easy to work with for me, and if I do anything as far as recording software, I'm probably going to upgrade to a newer version of FL Studio, but I seem to be doing fine with this FL Studio 9. I've had no real issues with it, and I find it very intuitive and really, really easy to get my shit out. So, but yeah. And then of course the live show in the last couple of years, like as I mentioned earlier, in the last couple of years I've started using, or the last year and a half, I've started using Ableton Live Lite because I was having issues with Kakos Reaper. I like Ableton. I don't like the limitations I currently have, so at some point I'll be upgrading it, and maybe I'll switch over from FL Studio to writing everything in Ableton. We'll see. But that's kind of how things have changed over the years. Like gear setups have changed. An occasional not even occasional downgrade. There's only been really one downgrade, which was Ableton Live Lite for the live performances. As far as like music goes, like I'm always trying to inject new ideas into it. Like I'm always, I've done challenges and stuff. Like I did a time challenge for a couple of albums. One of them I actually wrote in 2.5 weeks. My goal was to do it in a month, but I did it in 2.5 weeks. So hey, I surpassed my goal. I gave it away. So the album after that, Chaos Create, that I wrote in a month's time. I was trying to do it as quickly as possible. I wanted to do it in 2.5 weeks as well, but at a certain point it just got to be I wanted to take more time with it and stuff, so it took me a month to write that. And then of course I had somebody else do guitars as well as bass guitars. I had a friend do bass and another friend do guitars on that album. And yeah, subject matter, content, stuff like that, like all the music subject matter, like I'm trying to inject new ideas, doing challenges. I read a lot of books. I look at politics, modern politics. I look at like what's going on in the world, stuff like that. I would say as far as like evolution musically. I think it's become more focused. Definitely still positive messages and stuff. The next thing I'm doing, the next album that I kind of have in the tank, that that's a little bit more serious because of the last couple of years of the pandemic and then all the political bullshit, and not only fucking Trump but fucking like just some of the politics in general, just being tired of the same pedantic bullshit and stuff like that. And yeah, you know, just that's the thing, is like you need to inject new ideas into stuff. And you know, when you're writing something, or maybe you have an interest in something, like maybe you want to learn about, you know, I don't know, fucking networks or something like that, like a computer network and how it works and stuff. That stuff can trickle into your songs. Like you can use that as inspiration for your songs and stuff. I would say musically, I'm always like I have an album in the tank. I'm already working on another one, and I'm one of those people who doesn't believe writer's block is a real thing. Like I think, I think people just need to get into the habit of, like, you know, sitting down, and even if you don't feel like it, or if you feel there's a block, just play, you know, just play and just put something into your digital audio workstation, and maybe it is shit, but you know what, you can come back to it at another, you can set it aside after, you know, a half hour or an hour, and come back to it another day and refine it and fuck with it and do whatever. And yeah, that's kind of how I work. And like over the years, I work a lot faster. I'll even do things like, if I'm looking to, it's kind of funny actually, because like I'll put myself in situations where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go for a walk over to this place, so it puts me in a fucking mental, like a mental state where it's like ideas start to flow. And sometimes it's just going for a walk, sometimes it's going for a walk to somewhere, sometimes it's even going to a place where I don't normally find inspiration, but there's something that's drawing me to it. There's other things that I do, like when I'm traveling and stuff, I always bring my laptop. I don't typically bring stuff that I'm currently working on with me, because it's usually on my desktop, and I don't transfer the files over to my laptop, but I usually start new things when I'm traveling. And I find, you know, changing up your environment can change things as well. Like, you know, like sometimes I'll go sit in a coffee shop and just, you know, start writing music and stuff like that. Putting myself in environments where I feel inspired, and sometimes just changing your environment can change things and inspire you in different ways and stuff. So I do have goals as far as, like, you know, releases and stuff. Like I do have a goal in mind of how many albums I want to release by the time I die and stuff like that. So I'm always working towards those goals and stuff. Try to keep things positive and never stopping, because life is too short. And I hope I answered your question. We'll see you in the next video.